Hey, good afternoon, y'all. It's Ned over at My Philippine Dreams, coming at you from Dumaguete City, the city of gentle people. Negros Oriental, the Philippines. It's hot today. It's very hot. Looks like it's going to hit 93 again. The last couple weeks have been really hot. It's been like summertime again. It kind of sucks. So I'm sitting in the air conditioning. All right, we're going to try something different today. Instead of this being a talking head video, where you have to look at my ugly mug as I go through these topics, I'm going to overlay some snorkeling footage that I took this past Wednesday down in Darwin. We had the potluck down in Darwin. It was very nice seeing everybody down there. Had a good time. And I actually got some really good footage of little baby Clark, who's grown up now and is having quite the way with the ladies. One of the things that I've tried to do in the past is to approach some of the subjects of Filipino cultural psychology that kind of bewilder foreigners, especially when you first get here. There's going to be people doing things or not doing things that is going to seem kind of strange. And even after we've been here for a long time, I actually think sometimes it gets worse. As time goes along and you're seeing more and more of these behaviors, it becomes more and more frustrating. So I've tried in the past to try to come to some understanding of why Filipinos do and don't do the things that they do and don't do. And sometimes I've been successful and other times I have been less successful, but I'm still struggling with it and it's still something I'm working on. And as foreigners living here as expatriates from whatever country we're coming from, we really got to put some effort into trying to understand why things happen the way they do here. So, on this episode of My Philippine Dreams, we're going to be doing just that. I actually wrote a pretty long article, I think it was over 2,500 words, and I'll post it up on our website, about some of the pillars of what I call Filipino cultural psychology. You know, being foreigners, we're basically strangers in a strange land. It's always advisable to have at least some understanding of how things work on a local level. Most of the times, though, you know, and I've had much experience with this, it's easier said than done. Coming from the West, the one, you know, the culture that I'm most familiar with, things are pretty straightforward. We're born squealing, slimy messes. We're raised by our families. We go to school. We struggle through adolescence. Eventually, we secure some type of career path. And along the way, we worship, depending on your beliefs, which is usually carried over from your family. And confront life's travails head on. And for many, we'll go on and raise a family of our own. Smaller families in the Philippines typically. Business and personal matters in the West are addressed directly. It's very right in your face. Things are laid out quite clear. And since everybody else is pretty much going through life on a similar path, things just seem to happen with a certain level of normalcy and expectedness. In the Philippines, however, as many know, the cultural flow is quite a bit different. Now I'm probably going to have to break this episode. Oh, I hope, by the way, you're enjoying the fish. That was actually a pretty good day. The problem is the camera's kind of jerky because it was kind of rough, so I'm floating around on the surface and getting buffeted around, so try not to get vertigo. The Philippines of today, as long as you're enjoying the fish, is pretty much the sum total of its parts of its yesteryears. It's basically a conglomeration of where it's been. And on a personal level with people, it's pretty much the same thing. We are who we were. In the Philippines, you had the initial Indo-Malay tribal settlements. Then you had the strong influence of the Chinese mercantile empires, which were running around this part of the world for hundreds of years. Then you had the 300 plus years of Spanish colonialization and followed by 50 years of American Hollywood rule. So it's pretty much a mishmash of values carried over from generations of external influence. And don't forget, the Philippines is also a fairly young nation. It's only had its independence for about 65 years, and as such, it seems to be struggling for some sort of national identity. Now, with that in mind, we're going to be looking at six aspects of the pillars of Filipino cultural psychology. Let's take a moment to briefly examine some of these aspects that were influenced by the Indo-Malay settlement, the Asian influences, and a lot of it also from the centuries of Spanish occupation. And for the immediate purposes of this, I'll refer to them as the 6 pillars of Filipino culture. They are, in no specific order, number 1, family. Family is very important here in the Philippines. Number 2, pakikisama, which is a Tagalog term which basically means smooth interaction, smooth interpersonal relations. Number 3, amor propio, which is self-love or self-esteem. Number 4, hiya, shame. And we've discussed amor propio and hiya previously. And we've also discussed number 5, which is utang na loob, which is a debt of obligation. And finally, just for the 6 purposes of the pillars that we'll be looking at today, we have bahala na, which literally translates to God willing. It's like inshallah. Or you could look at it like the Spanish que sera, sera. What will be, will be. And this isn't an authoritative discourse. I really don't know what I'm talking about here. I just collected a lot of this information through online research, a lot in speaking with locals, and with just a lot of good amount of cause and effect reflection. I mean, a lot of it was talking to locals, walking up to people, sometimes out of the blue, which is kind of strange and it's kind of direct. It's not recommended. And I'd say, hey, why do Filipinos do X, Y, or Z? And then they'd explain and try to, name the terms. Interestingly enough, younger Filipinos, a lot of times, they won't know exactly what amor propio, hiya, utang na loob, what all these terms are. But when you describe them, they understand basically what it is. Older Filipinos generally know all the terms, and it's an important part of the culture of the older Filipinos. So, seeking to understand why Filipinos do or don't do some of the things that to us, as foreigners or Westerners or expats or Power Rangers, they call us foreigners and Power Rangers, seems odd. Okay, what kind of behaviors? Let's take a look at some of them. Why do they say yes when they actually mean no? Why do they invite total strangers passing by their gates into their homes for a fiesta celebration? If you've been here for a while, that's happened to you. Why do they have such a hard time saying that they don't know the answer to something? Why can they be so sensitive at times? And the obsession they have with up-to-date fashions and gadgets. Why do they take so many selfies? Why is corruption so hard to root out in the Philippines? Why are Filipinos always asking so many questions when you first meet them? Which, again, for a Westerner is jarring, especially when you get here. Especially like from where I'm from, you just don't walk up to strangers and start asking all kinds of personal questions. And finally, and this is the one that continues to blow my mind on a regular basis, why do Filipinos voluntarily ship themselves off to work for decades in foreign countries and send all the money back to their families? The list of questions goes on and on. At least these are some of the ones that I've come up with. Hopefully by the time we're done, I'm going to have to split this up into a multi-part series. If you want, you can actually go over to the website. I'll put a link down in the video description box and you can read the whole thing. You don't have to listen to these videos and look at all the fish. But hopefully by the time we're done, we'll be able to uncover at least some answers as we feel our way through the aforementioned 6 pillars of Filipino culture. Also, again, this is not an authoritative, etched-in-stone assessment. I am certainly no expert on Filipino culture, or anything else for that matter. And it's just simply my own personal musings as I continue to stumble along in my never-ending quest for personal edification. Yes, the source is my friend. Now, we covered some of the 6 pillars in previous posts, specifically amor propio, hiya, and utang na loob. And I'll try to give links to them below in the video description box as well. There is quite a bit to actually note about each aspect, but in this post we're just going to give a brief description of each and note how most, if not all, of the 6 pillars are interrelated. And we're just going to hit the first one today, and then we're going to take a break and put up the second part next time. First up, number 1, the number 1 biggest, in my humble opinion, pillar of Filipino cultural psychology is family. Some people, well, basically if you ask a Filipino, they'll say God. God first, and then family. But family is so important here, it kind of like supersedes a lot of things. Like with many other Asian nations, family is the singular backbone of Filipino culture. There's no doubt about it, in my humble opinion. Nothing is more important to them. And generally, the needs of the family typically outweigh the needs of the individual family member. And we'll get to those needs and sacrificing oneself a little bit later in utang na loob and pakikisama. Unlike tighter and usually smaller Western nuclear families. Filipino families include aunts, uncles, and even first, second, third, fourth cousins. Sometimes you got, they'll incorporate people who are just hanging around. Sometimes they'll incorporate helpers to help into their families, or just people that are hanging around in their yard. Filipino family get-togethers are important events, and no expenses spared when it comes to having a total, what they call like a blowout. It's like having a huge party, replete with caterers, tents, live music, karaoke, parlor games, and of course, freshly roasted pigs. We just had one the other day, lechon baboy. Ageism also doesn't seem to be an issue in the Philippines like it is in most of the West, where ageism is alive and well. Older family members are usually treated with the highest respect by younger members. When you see Filipinos, they'll raise their hand, they'll take the other person's hand, the older person's hand, and they'll raise it to their forehead as a sign of respect. And also, like younger siblings, like with the kids, there's also a social hierarchy there. And the younger siblings will usually defer to their older brother, kuya, or sisters, ate. All right, so next time, it's almost been 10 minutes. We're going to look at pakikisama. And again, we're going to talk about amor, propio, hiya, utang, loob. And we're going to answer, hopefully, some of the questions that we asked a little while ago. So there's a lot of material, and there's a lot I want to cover. Hope you've enjoyed the fish. Check out the article. I'll put the link up. You can click on the box or go down the video description box. And as always, be sure to like, dislike, subscribe, and share. Until next time, where we get into pakikisama, this is Ned over at My Philippine Dreams. Take care, y'all.